Good afternoon, and welcome to our first episode of Church on Sundays. I'm Dave Sheridan. We started with a processional music. That was an excerpt from Kent Kennan's Trumpet Sonata, published by Warner Brothers. Next, we'll proceed to our reading. This week's reading is the Gospel according to Matthew, chapter 16, verse 18. You are Peter, and upon this rock I will build my church, and the gates of the netherworld shall not prevail against it. In today's podcast, we're going to talk about the science. The science. The science. We follow the science. You know, back in my day, there was a whole group of us who followed the science. We were called engineers. In fact, we didn't just follow the science, we were trained how to leverage the science. As I think back on it, old man Fensky, who set the standards for chemical engineers at Penn State, wouldn't even think of letting us touch an industrial heat exchanger without having demonstrated a mastery of the science behind it. In simple terms, it wasn't enough for engineering students to know how to use the steam tables. We had to know how to derive the steam tables. And that meant we had to have a mastery and demonstrate a mastery of thermodynamics and all the advanced mathematics that's taught to you during physical chemistry. The science. We follow the science. You know, when I hear that phrase repeated so often these days, it reminds me of incantations. Incantations like a tribalism, like the Catholic faith of my youth, like a religion. Here's my point. In the name of science, if we start reciting incantations and engineering is nowhere to be found, we've got a big gap. You know, a friend of mine, Bob Fortney, who runs a manufacturing company down in Virginia, and I were talking about the new manufacturing renaissance being promoted. And Bob made a very insightful point when he said, that's well and good, but the foundation, the philosophy, is lost, and maybe for a long time. So there's very little basis on which to build a manufacturing renaissance today. In other words, where's the rock on which we build this factory? So if you think about it, if industrialists are standing on the shoulders of engineers and inventors, and engineers and inventors are standing on the shoulders of scientists and mathematicians, and scientists and mathematicians are standing on the shoulders of philosophers who taught us all how to think, what happens to commerce when there are a lot of missing links across that? Well, that's why I'm starting a church and spreading the word. We're going to find out the answers to these critical questions. So I'll see you next week on Church on Sundays. Excerpt from Tchaikovsky's Six. See you next week.